itself raises this doubt, this question that we may perhaps, in fact, only be uh, acted upon, and that this whole idea of free will and intellectual action is illusion. We are simply bodies that are being acted upon by emotions and physical forces and instinct and natural necessity and all of that. So the bodily part of ourselves gives us doubt about the very existence of an intellectual part of ourselves. Uh, so this would indicate that we think of our free act as one which we execute of our own choice, in no servitude to necessity, uh, or chance, or overmastering passion, nothing thwarting our will. The voluntary is conceived as an event amenable to will, and occurring or not as our will dictates. And so uh, we thus imagine our will in opposition to the soul crushing force of emotion as being completely free, right? Having no servitude to chance or necessity, right? That which is unbound entirely. Plotinus thinks that's not quite right either, right? Neither are we completely determined by physical forces and emotions. We have some free will, but that free will may not be as absolutely pure as we might be given to think. Uh, Now, this is where uh, things get a little bit more specific and interesting, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. Uh, at the last paragraph on 513, he says, differing conceptually, the two conditions will often coincide, but sometimes will clash. Okay, right? So the condition of the body, the condition of the mind will sometimes coincide, but will sometimes clash. Meaning that what appears to be a free action will sometimes, in fact, not be. And what appears to be an unfree action may, in fact, be something that is determined by the soul, by the intellectual principle. It says, thus a man would be master to kill, but the act will not be voluntary if in the victim he had failed to recognize his own father. Perhaps, however, that ignorance is not compatible with real freedom, for the knowledge necessary to a voluntary act cannot be limited to certain particulars, but must cover the entire field. Why, for example, should killing be involuntary in the failure to recognize a father, and not so in the failure to recognize the wickedness of murder? If because the killer ought to have learned, still ignorance of the duty of learning, and the cause of that ignorance remain alike involuntary. So what Plotinus is referring to here, this story of a man would be master to kill, but the act will not be voluntary if in the victim he had failed to recognize his own father. What Plotinus is referring to here is the story of Oedipus. The story of Oedipus Rex, which was a play written by the classical Greek poet Sophocles in the 5th century BC of Athens. And the story goes roughly like this. Oedipus was born with a particular fate, marked by fate. He was fated to marry his mother and kill his father. Oedipus was born the son of the king of Thebes and the queen of Thebes. He was born a prince and was, right, when it was learned that he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother, his parents left him on a hillside to die. Uh, that's not how fate works. You can't avoid your fate so easily. And this baby on the hillside is picked up by a shepherd. And the shepherd takes the baby back and raises the baby as his own. So Oedipus gets some foster parents. Now, Oedipus's fate, however, doesn't change when he is adopted and when he learns to call a different set of people mother and father. And his fate is revealed to him once again by the oracle at Delphi, when an oracle reveals this fate to him. I actually don't remember if it's the oracle at Delphi. It might be a different oracle. So trying to be transparent in my not having brushed up on every detail of the story. So please forgive me, but I'll be clear about what I'm remembering correctly and not. So this fate is revealed to Oedipus after he's been adopted, and he decides, well, I don't want to kill my father, and I don't want to marry my mother, and so to try to avoid this fate, I'm going to get as far away from home as possible. And so he leaves home, believing that he's leaving his biological mother and father, and that therefore, by leaving home, he can avoid killing them, killing his father, marrying his mother. Along the way, so he decides to go to, where else? Thebes, right? The city-state where he, unbeknownst to him, was originally born. And along the way, he happens upon a man who is getting in his way. They get into a fight, and in the fight, Oedipus kills this man. You might say someone who's just learned that their fate is to kill their father might abstain from killing anyone just for safety's sake. But again, that's not how fate works, for better or for worse, sadly, in this case. So Oedipus kills someone, and of course, it turns out later on that this person that he's killed is his father. Now, when he arrives at Thebes, there is a Riddler. Anyway, there's a Riddler, and the Riddler is telling a series of riddles. There's a plague on, and this is why I bring this story up. Right? Thebes is in the midst of a plague, and in order to break the plague, in order to escape the plague, someone has to answer this Riddler's riddle. And the riddle is, you maybe heard it before, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs at night? And Oedipus answers this riddle. He answers a human being who crawls as a child, walks on 2 legs in adulthood, and walks with a cane in old age. So Oedipus answers this riddle correctly. The plague is broken, and as a result, Thebes makes Oedipus their king. There's interesting stuff going on here about also monarchy and aristocracy, and the fact that this prince who was fated to be the king of Thebes ends up becoming the king of Thebes anyway. That's a different story, a different set of themes to interpret. But as a result, Oedipus is made king of Thebes. Having killed his father, there's a vacancy on the throne. He takes it, and he marries the existing queen of Thebes, who happens to be his biological mother. So Oedipus has fulfilled his destiny and has achieved his fate. He has killed his father and married his mother. Okay. Right. This is also the foundation for the Freudian Oedipus complex. Another set of concerns. Now, after some time, the plague returns to Thebes, and it's worse than ever, right? Everyone is dying of this plague. This plague is shutting everything down. Right? Now, coronavirus is not a plague. Plague is more serious, right? We look at the Black Death. The fatality rate is much higher. But it's an analogy, right? There's a parallel to be drawn. Now, how is this plague going to be lifted this time? Right? How can Oedipus, now king, stop this plague? And in order to stop the plague, he consults with another prophet, Tiresias, a blind prophet. And the prophet says, in order to get rid of the plague, in order for the plague to be broken again, you have to root out corruption in your own administration, right? In your own government, in the castle. And so Oedipus says, all right, what do we need to do? And he says, well, we need to find out who killed the last king. Right? Who is responsible for killing this king? And now Oedipus doesn't know that the man that he killed on the road to Thebes was the king of Thebes. He doesn't know that he was king. He doesn't know that it was his father. So Tiresias says, there is rank corruption in the castle. All is not well. Right? To quote another favorite of Freud's, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. We need to find who killed the king. We need to root out this corruption. We need to know what's going on. We need to have knowledge. And so, through a series of events, an investigation, Oedipus discovers that he himself has killed the king, and the king was his father, that he is the source of corruption. He is responsible for the death of the king. He has fulfilled his fate. That the reason the plague is back is because of him. Now, a man would be master to kill, but the act will not be voluntary if in the victim he had failed to recognize his own father. Oedipus, his action appears to be free. He kills someone of his own volition. But because he acted without knowledge, because he acted without having all the facts, he acted rashly, that action, which appeared to be voluntary, which appeared to be of his own choice, in fact was not. He didn't know what he was doing. He thought he knew what he was doing. He thought, therefore, that the action was free. But because he didn't know, because he didn't have knowledge, doesn't have the kind of wisdom, you might say, needed to act freely, to genuinely act voluntarily, the action was not free. So freedom and correct action require knowledge and wisdom. They require, right, knowing what is real. So I don't know how persuasive an argument this is, how persuasive a case this is, but the value of doing philosophy, the value of working through a text like Plotinus's Enneads, is